The necessity of term limits in the United States Supreme Court. Presidential immunity, rights to one's own bodily decisions, and executive branch powers are only a few of the many recent controversial cases heard by the Supreme Court of the United States. Some would argue that the Supreme Court has ruled with heavy bias recently due to factors like bribery, lobbying, age, and religion. As a student studying political science, I find it important that the United States accurately represents and governs for the people. After all, that is one of the core principles of the United States of America. In order to better represent Americans, we should have term limits on Supreme Court justices. The Supreme Court has let down Americans for decades, whether it be from political corruption or unalignment with public values. Term limits can help combat these issues. Political corruption has always been a problem in the United States, with politicians across the aisle attempting to gain and exploit power. And the current Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has had a rather persuasive and transactional relationship with billionaire and CEO Harlan Crow. Thomas acknowledged that multiple trips and gifts that he took were given and covered by billionaire CEO and Republican donor Harlan Crow. This further reflected in Thomas's annual financial disclosure report, which he stopped putting these gifts on, which has led to some controversy in recent years. Crow is an American real estate developer and former CEO of Trammell Crow Company, and Crow operates a vast global development company, meaning different court rulings can impact his business. While one could argue that this relationship could simply be one of friends, Thomas's regular stance on land use and development says otherwise. Some court rulings where this was shown very heavily and prominently is Sackett versus the EPA. In 2023, Thomas joined the majority to limit the EPA's jurisdiction on wetlands and water pollution, or water pollution regulation. Another court case is Cedar Point Nursery versus Hassid. Justice joined the majority again to limit union organizers' rights to be able to access the farmland in which they worked on. Um, and this next court case, Thomas did not agree. He dissented in, but San Remo Hotel versus City and County of San Francisco, the court concurred that the decision limits a property owner's ability to have their federal takings claims heard in federal court after state court litigation. As I stated, Thomas was a minority in the opinion and wrote a dissent. Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution states that judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior and shall, at stated times, receive their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. This article of the Constitution suggests that judges should hold office during good behavior. Because the court upholds the law, it's hard to remove somebody out of the Supreme Court position using this constitutional clause as a bias. This is where term limits are beneficial. Due to the fact that the court upholds the law, there will most likely never be a case where a judge is removed based off of good behavior. Corruption and bribery, I would believe, is not good behavior, and that is very evident in Clarence Thomas's case. But this is why term limits are important because they can mitigate the issue. Since the court will most likely never remove a justice based off of bad behavior, time removes a justice. Furthermore, the Supreme Court to many Americans can seem unaligned or have outdated values. The Supreme Court in recent years has ruled in many ways that don't align with most Americans. There's been numerous unpopular court rulings, but these are just the two that I've found to be most polarizing. Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization. This court case overturned Roe v. Wade, and abortions are no longer protected. With Roe v. Wade, abortions were federally protected, and now they're not, meaning states have the right to make abortions illegal. And while this issue is a very polarizing topic, most Americans agree, 63% of Americans to be exact, believe that abortion should be legal in most/all cases, according to Pew Research Center. Uh, Another wildly unpopular court case was Trump versus the United States of America. This court ruled that the president has immunity for criminal indictments for official acts. The ruling was wildly unpopular, and according to numerous pollsters, but specifically Navigator, 78% of the United States public believe that nobody is above the law, including the president. Furthermore, the age of the justices in the Supreme Court do not reflect the age of most Americans. The demographic breakdown of the United States based on age is 8.4% 18 to 25-year-olds, 12.3% 26 to 35-year-olds, 25.8%, 35 to 54-year-olds, 12.7%, 55 to 64-year-olds, 17.8%, 65-year-olds and above. Most people pursuing law are in the first age group and would be studying and building experience. The latter four groups would be eligible for Supreme Court justice positions. Currently, 5 out of the 9 Supreme Court justices are over 65 years old. This leads to an unequal representation for the people, as only 17.8% of the population is 65 or older. While it is not possible to fairly represent every age group in the Supreme Court, and merit should also be a factor when appointing justices, these age discrepancies can foster a Supreme Court that rolls decades behind public opinion. While it may be hard to uphold the Constitution's good behavior clause, it is possible to add term limits. A majority of Americans support term limits on the Supreme Court. In fact, 68% of Americans support term limits on Supreme Court justices. In order to codify term limits, the Senate and the House of Representatives must come up with an amendment. Individuals can contact their senators and United States representatives to share concern for term limits. The more public support and media representation is shown for term limits on the Supreme Court, the more possible it is to enact term limits. The Supreme Court heavily influences the United States politics. As an integral branch of government, it is in charge of keeping checks and balances on the executive and legislative branch through their judiciary power. This is why we should have term limits.